Krista, would you like to do the introduction?
Yes, of course. So thank you everyone for attending in person and on Zoom for this incredibly special event today. We are welcoming Miko Peled at the P21 Gallery, where we have our current exhibit, Art of Palestine, From the River to the Sea, there in London. And Miko Peled is an author, writer, speaker, and human rights activist born in Palestine who lives in the United States. He is considered by many to be one of the clearest voices calling for justice in Palestine, support of the Palestinian call for boycott, divestment, and sanctions, known as BDS, and the creation of a single democracy with equal rights in all of historic Palestine. Miko is also an accomplished professional martial artist. He travels regularly to Palestine, where he speaks and works with the Popular Resistance, the BDS movement, and other justice groups, which has led to his arrest by Israeli authorities. His blog is dedicated to tearing down the separation wall and transforming the Israeli apartheid system into a democratic state with equal rights. Miko has published 2 books, The General's Son, back in 2016, and his most recent book, Injustice, the Story of the Holy Land Foundation 5, which was released in 2017. We're so honored to have Miko with us today to speak on this important topic, which excuse me, just one second, on genocide and denial. What's next in the struggle to free Palestine? Welcome, Miko. So good to see you again.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Go. It's a little bit strange with all the technology and the screens and everything. But we're over here, so you can look directly at us if you like. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah. Back, yeah? Mm-hmm. 50 Hertz. Yeah. So it's nice to be back here. I spoke here about 10 years ago. Pretty much right when my book, The General's Son, came out, or maybe a year later or so. And so it's nice to be back. It's nice to be here with Faisal. He happens to be here and this wonderful exhibit. So it's nice to combine these, the talk and the exhibit and the movie. I met Jacques the first time about 10 years ago in Brussels. And I had a brief conversation with him. He came to my lecture. And as you can see, he's very impressive. It's hard not to be impressed with him. And we only spoke briefly. And then last year, I went with my friend Jordan, who actually made the film. He and I went and we spent a few days with Jacques at his home in Brussels to make this film. We have hours and hours of footage, but we condensed it. And I think these 12 minutes really hit the spot. They really say everything that needs to be said. I find it particularly interesting when he says things like, what do Zionists that have a lot of money do? They pay to send other people over there and they stay here. And then what's also very interesting that he describes Palestine at a time that there's actually very little testimony. The period immediately after the massive ethnic cleansing of 1948. So, the cities are empty. Personally, when we spoke, he described Jaffa, Askelan, all these cities, Majdal, empty like ghost towns. And then these groups of people that they brought in, just like the orphanage, just like people like himself. And just the horror of it and the weirdness of it and the treatment of Arabs and the willingness with which, or the ease with which people can just kill someone because they're an Arab. And we see today, all these years later, that this is going on. Of course, it's going on in a way that is like completely crazy, completely mad. But it's interesting to hear him talk about it. What he sensed in the very, very beginning is what has been happening. And the country was all Palestine. And I think it's important because he talks about the Palestinians, he talks about Palestine, he talks about the orchards, he talks about the oranges. This was all part of Palestine. and it was all stolen. And of course, the people were thrown out. There's also, I think, really, really important to put to rest this myth that somehow the Holocaust or the answer to the Holocaust is somehow the state of Israel. And he puts that to rest as well, very, very clearly. And he's not the only one, but there was a very large, rather large group of survivors of the Holocaust of that generation that spoke up. Many of them passed away already, but that spoke up for Palestine and rejected Zionism completely. And also, in terms of numbers, very, very few survivors of the Holocaust actually ended up going to Palestine, into what became Israel. So there's always this argument that, or this question that people ask, how can the people who suffered that now do this? Well, it's not the same people. It's not the same people. The vast majority of Holocaust survivors did not go there. And like we heard from him, many of the ones that did go couldn't stand it and left. I mean, he couldn't wait to leave. He ended up getting a job and getting some papers and getting the hell out. And he was there for maybe less than 2 years. And he got the hell out. So I think these are important issues because they come up a lot. And of course, here in, people have experienced this very, very much here in the United States, in the United Kingdom, being labeled as Holocaust deniers, being labeled as anti-Semitic, just because they either don't accept the Zionist line on the Holocaust, and they, of course, and they support the Palestinian call for justice. So again, I think this is very relevant, and it's nice to hear, it's good to hear someone like him speaking and saying these things. And I think this guttural sense that he had of what he saw, this, like he calls it, disgust of this militaristic establishment that was created. And of course, I come from that. My family had a hand in creating that. My father was served in the Zionist militia in 1948, and then became an officer and retired a general, and so on. And so I come from that, and then of course I went through this transformation. But now to hear him say it like this is I think incredibly, incredibly important and refreshing and interesting as well. So that's why I was in Liverpool yesterday, and lately I've been opening my presentations, opening my talks with Jacques and his testimony. And again, the 12 minutes, I think the editing was really good. The 12 minutes really encapsulates what needs to be said and really hit the spirit of what he has to say. We're going to do a little conversation here, so I'll pass the mic back to Faisal.
Thank you, Miko. So there's a ceasefire in Lebanon. Gaza continues to be in the grips of the genocide. Business as usual for Israel and Gaza now. And perhaps now they have more resources to dedicate to Gaza. There's going to be a new president of the U.S. There are all kinds of things brewing already there. So my question to Miko is, what do we have now?
Yeah. So I'm going to pull this out. There's a part of my bio that was missed out, which is the latest chapter of my bio, which is that I'm the founder and the president of a new organization in the United States called Palestine House of Freedom, Dar Hurriya. And we established it, we have a space right on Capitol Hill. If you know Washington, D.C., just 2 blocks away from the Capitol on Pennsylvania Avenue, which is a big deal. We have a beautiful space. We placed the Palestinian flag, so it's right there on Pennsylvania Avenue. And the intention was to create a space, a high-profile space, centrally located, with a flag, with the name Palestine on it, so that there is that space in Washington, D.C., because there wasn't one. And we've only been around for maybe 6 months that we've had the space and we started working, but it's moving very, very rapidly. We're hosting events. Other organizations are coming and hosting events, using the space. Activists just come and use it as a working space. We're putting out a lot of information on social media, and everybody's asking the same question. So what's next? So that's why, the title was the denial of the genocide, and now what? And it seems to me that the efforts to dismantle apartheid and replace it with a free Palestine from the river to the sea, that effort, there wasn't going to be any difference in the need for the effort, regardless of who became president of the United States. The support for Israel is across the board. There is no difference whether they're Republican or Democrats. And so we need to work as hard as we can. And our mission, the way we describe the mission of Palestine House of Freedom is we wanted to make it as clear as possible and as unambiguous as possible that the objective is a dismantling of apartheid and the establishing of a free Palestine from the river to the sea with equal rights, because that is the only option that will allow peace and stability. There is no other option in which there could be peace in Palestine. There is no option that there could be stability, because the source of the violence, the source of the instability is the apartheid regime, which was established, as we saw in the movie, right there and then at that point. So what are we doing next? I don't think we're not going to do anything different. I think as people of conscience, as activists, as people who care and want to see a free Palestine, we need to maybe hone the message a little bit, maybe make sure that we're expressing ourselves in the clearest way possible, so there is no ambiguity. People still say things like Israel-Palestine. I visited Palestine and I visited Israel. It's important to realize that this whole thing is Palestine. By referring to it as Israel, we are legitimizing the horrors, we're legitimizing the apartheid, we're legitimizing the genocide. So, like you heard when I was introduced, I was born and raised in Palestine, albeit within the colonial part of it, the sphere with which the colonizers exist, which is Israel. But the country is Palestine. So things like that make a big difference. We're not a lobby group. We're a nonprofit, but we're not a lobby. So we define what we do as robust education, as robust an education as we can. And so the first thing we did was on our social media is we put out excerpts from Amnesty International's report on apartheid from almost 3 years ago. People don't know that there's apartheid. Of course they don't know that there was a report by Amnesty that demonstrates very, very clearly with data that the entire country is an apartheid regime, is an apartheid state, that Palestinians, regardless of where they live throughout Palestine, are subjected to apartheid. So the part of the challenge that we have is that we're talking to an audience that is completely ignorant. I think this is true probably in this country too, but certainly in the United States, the education system is a Zionist education system. So at least half the time, if not more, when you say Palestine, people will confuse it with Pakistan. At least half the time, if not more. It's very common, very common. And I'm talking about people who are educated.
The L and the K are next to each other on the keyboard also. That's a Zionist conspiracy.
Of course, it always. So now people receive a Zionist education. And by the way, after they confuse it with Pakistan, if you say Israel, then the response is completely different. Well, of course, Israel, we know Israel, we love Israel, Israel is our ally, the Holocaust, the Bible, and on and on and on. The entire Zionist propaganda comes right out, that entire education. And so that's a very, very serious challenge. And we decided to focus on Washington, D.C. because that's where decisions are being made. And that's the urgency is to push in that space more than any other. Excuse me. So to demonstrate and to speak clearly about apartheid, to recognize and to share the Amnesty report on apartheid, we've been encouraging organizations to adopt the report. I'm sure many of you remember that the Zionists created a new definition of anti-Semitism, and then they demanded that every organization, governmental organizations, non-governmental organizations, universities, churches, everybody across the world adopt that new definition. Once you adopt it, now you're bound by it. Now, of course, the new definition is very confusing, so I think by design, so people don't really know what they adopted. But I think it's important. It's a good concept. So we are calling on organizations, the faith groups, and so on to adopt the Amnesty report, because the Amnesty report at the end has recommendations as to what needs to be done when the crime of apartheid is being perpetrated. And these are things like sanctions, these are things like an arms embargo, and so on, things that we talk about anyway. But within that, now we're not forcing, but we're getting organizations to read and discuss the report and then adopt the report with the recommendations. And then on a parallel track to talk about what are we fighting for? What is the end result? There's still a lot of ambiguity about that when we talk to people, even people within the pro-justice camp, the pro-Palestine camp. We have to stop being, I think it's important to stop being ambiguous about it and to be very clear what it is that we're talking about. There is no other option but a free Palestine from the river to the sea, other than what we're seeing right now. So the more clear we are, the more we put out that message, the more unified we are as people of conscience, as activists on this issue, I think that the faster we're going to get to where we're going to go. And again, in terms of who's president, who's not president, who's prime minister, who's in power, on the issue of Palestine, we need to work just as hard, because across the board politically, support for Israel is the narrative. That's the accepted discourse. There is no other discourse. So it seems insane, especially again in a place like Washington, D.C., where they can't wait to send more billions of dollars, billions and billions more in weapons, and suddenly to start talking about, well, actually, we should be talking about dismantling apartheid. At the same time, we do see some cracks in the wall. We've seen people resign from the administration. I've been in touch with senior staffers and a couple of members of Congress who realize that there's no two-state solution, that this is just a mantra because they don't know what else to say, and are interested in working together to understand what kind of talking points they can use in order to start expressing this and sort of present this. So that's really where we are right now. And again, going back to the original question, Trump, no Trump, ceasefire in Lebanon, no ceasefire in Lebanon. On the issue of Palestine, we need to just keep working as hard as we possibly can.
It appears that, at least in the United States, there's a concerted effort on the part of the Israel supporters, the lobbies, to discredit as much of the Palestinian support structures and systems as possible. And the way the Zionists are going about it is they're using legislation in Congress, since they already bought the Congress and they got that in their back pocket. So it's the easiest way to reach for to pass legislation to criminalize support for Palestine. And there are several aspects of it. And the most recent blurring one is a legislation that would give the Secretary of the Treasury complete discretion over disqualifying nonprofit organizations that the Secretary deems to be inappropriate. And they don't have to present any facts. There won't be any appeals. There's no due process whatsoever. The decisions are final.
Right.
I'd like to have Miko kind of chime in on that a little bit and see. There's probably more to it than meets the eye.
Yeah. So have people here heard about this legislation in the US? So so I wrote a book in 2016 called Injustice, the story of the Holy Land Foundation. And the Holy Land Foundation was the largest Muslim charity organization in the United States. And after 9/11, they were targeted, they were closed down, and then they were designated a terrorist organization. And then 5 Palestinian American Muslims were sent to federal prison. 2 were released since. 1 was deported. 3 are still in jail. 2 of the 3 that are still in prison received 65-year jail sentences. 65. And the way it works is the process is, first of all, to take away the nonprofit status. So for some organizations, fine. So it's not a nonprofit status, we can still operate, but that's just the first step. Because the title under which this comes is support for terrorism. So if your nonprofit status is revoked because you're an organization that supports terrorism, then now you're being listed as an organization, you're designated. And the designation, there is no due process, and there is no burden of proof. So the Holy Land Foundation, so I learned this as I was working on the Holy Land Foundation case. Either the Treasury Department or the State Department can designate, and there is no burden of proof. It's just somebody saying, this is an organization that supports terrorism, and now you're on the list. Now you have to go prove that you're not. And in the aftermath of the Holy Land Foundation, the Holy Land Foundation was, obviously dismantled. Their assets were seized. The men went to jail and so on. But organizations that are deemed their successors, even though they had nothing to do with them, like there's a wonderful organization called American Muslims for Palestine and the Council for Islamic American Relations. These 2 organizations have been targeted since 9/11, and now they are retargeted, and they're being sued by lawyers who supposedly represent the families of the hostages that were taken on October the 7th. And they're being dragged to court because these people have been associated either through the Treasury or through the State Department with support for Hamas, regardless of the fact that they have absolutely no connection whatsoever. Regardless of the fact that Holy Land Foundation had no connection whatsoever. But, as they say, they don't want to ruin a good story with the facts. So right now, there are 3 very well-known Palestinian Americans, who I know personally, who are being dragged to court across the country from state to state to state, from different jurisdictions, by lawyers who claim that they represent the families of the hostages. Now, it's a war of attrition. It has nothing to do with whether they win or lose. It's the fact that these people have to drain their energy, drain their resources, and drain their time fighting this, as opposed to doing the important work that they need to be doing for Palestine. So the concern is not just that the nonprofit status would be taken away, but that this is just the beginning. This is just, the snowball effect. This is just the very, very beginning. And then it'll get worse and worse, which is, again, the Holy Land Foundation is the model for that. So that's really the fear. That's really the concern. And again, if it comes, it comes. We're going to have to deal with it. Faisal has a museum. We run an educational facility, but we have the Palestinian flag. We talk about Palestine. We talk about a free Palestine. Never mind the fact that we're talking about the peaceful resolution of Palestine, what they call the Palestine question, if you will. We're talking for a peaceful resolution, but that's not the point. We're talking about we're engaged in discourse that delegitimizes Zionism. And of course, they've been working very hard to conflate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. And that's a whole other conversation. So that's the concern, and that's why. So it didn't pass the first time, this piece of legislation, but with a new Congress coming in, it's going to pass for sure, and then we'll have to see what happens.
Thank you. We just can't wait to see what that's going to be like.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, what we're seeing in the United States, at least, is there's a country that was built on democracy, supposedly, and on all men created equal, justice for all. And that's being uh, allowing itself to trash these principles that they were built on, and to trash the Constitution itself, because all this legislation that we're talking about is anti-constitutional. The First Amendment in the Constitution of the United States protects freedom of speech, and all this stuff is freedom of speech. Uh, somebody accused you of being a terrorist, they can accuse you because you have freedom of speech. You can say anything you want without any retribution. But for the United States is allowing itself to suffer all these horrible things after, the founding fathers have created a wonderful environment, so to speak, even though not perfect, all this for the benefit of Israel. And I don't really think that most Americans grasp that. They've just been so indoctrinated by the mainstream media and the educational system to believe. Anyway, I'd like to see if anybody has questions here. Anybody has a question would like to raise your hand, and then we'll have you come to the microphone, and we'll give you the microphone to ask it. Yes, would you like to come here?
Maybe give them the phone. Take the mic to them. It'd be easier to take the mic to them.
Okay.
It'll be easier to take the mic to them.
I need to stand next to you because our hair. Hold this in your hand.
Yeah.
While you speak. Okay. That's for the people on the Zoom.
All right. Well, thank you, Miko, very much indeed. Could I ask you to speculate a bit about the future? Do you think that Israel is likely to annex most of Gaza? Is it going to annex the West Bank formally? And do you agree with Ilan Pappé? I expect you know that he predicts that the state of Israel will crumble with the sort of brain drain of so many, was it 600,000 Israelis going abroad, all the technocrats and so on, and that the remainder will be so diverse and militaristic and religiously fanatic and so on that the state will simply not survive.
I make a point of agreeing with Ilan Pappé. Usually he's one of the smartest guys I know. So there's no question, I think, and if anybody still has any doubt about this, I strongly recommend that they do away with these doubts. There's really no question whatsoever that the intention is to, as Jared Kushner described it, Trump's son-in-law, to basically plow the Gaza Strip, move the people out somewhere, and build, waterfront, seafront housing for people who, look like me. There's no question that that's going to happen. There's no question. The talk about annexing the West Bank in a way is a little bit funny because, well, tragically funny, because there's no West Bank. There is no West Bank. This thing that used to be known as the West Bank, which was a creation, something the Zionists created in 1949, no longer exists. It's gone. It's Judea and Samaria. There's no difference between the cities and towns and shopping malls and highways that exist there than the ones that exist in other parts of occupied Palestine. With the exception of, and this is how they describe it, the Israeli bureaucracies describe it, that in that area there are large concentrations of hostile population. And these are the ghettos. These are the ghettos where some 3.5 million people live in what used to be known as the West Bank. There's no, it's annexed, it's taken. I mean, I don't know what more they want. I mean, the Israelis who live there live under a completely different reality and different laws than the Palestinians do. The Palestinians live in ghettos. And when we talk about the Gaza Strip, again, I think the discourse on the Gaza Strip needs to be the same discourse that existed when concentration camps were liberated after World War II. It has to be liberated. It's a concentration camp. People talk about it sometimes as though it's a state, as though it's a real entity, political entity. It's a concentration camp. It was built as a concentration camp some 70 years ago. The intention of creating it is to create a concentration camp. And of course, now it's not just a concentration camp, it's a death camp. So unless we act with a new level of ferocity, of a new level of zeal, then we will definitely see things continue to get worse. We will see Israeli settlers come into what used to be the Gaza Strip and build. Of course we will. There's no question that that's what they want to do. Nothing will stop this catastrophe unless we step in and physically stop them. Nothing will stop the Israelis, this war machine, unless we step in physically somehow and stop them, or get our governments to impose severe sanctions. Severe sanctions. In the US, I remind people that the US Navy Sixth Fleet is in the Mediterranean. They can impose a no-fly zone. They can impose the arms embargo. They can liberate the Gaza concentration camp, just like the Red Army liberated the concentration camps after World War II. That's what needs to happen. In the absence of that, there's no telling what's going to happen. At the same time, your point about Ilan's, what he's talking about Israeli society and the state of Israel, it is crumbling. Israeli society was always made of different groups that are barely held by Scotch tape. That's really what Israeli society is. That's what Israel is. It's a bunch of different groups that have nothing to do with each other, that are held by Scotch tape, and the Scotch tape is falling apart. It's been falling apart for a very long time. Now, what October the 7th contributed is that these courageous fighters who came out of one of the poorest and most oppressed regions in the world, the Gaza concentration camp, they came out, and besides the fact that they demonstrated once again that the Israeli military and the Israeli intelligence services are nothing but a paper tiger, they managed to paralyze the apartheid state. The chaos that was created as a result of October 7th is still going on. So in every possible way imaginable, the state of Israel is crumbling, and Israeli society is being ripped apart. Different parts of society are ripping it apart. And I follow the Israeli news. I follow the Israeli Knesset news channel and all the different politicians. I follow them on social media. It's incredible. The discourse, the hate, the hatred between the different groups, the different politicians, the meetings of different parliamentary committees. It's the cussing and the violence is beyond belief, verbal violence, not yet physical violence. Now, thanks to the Yemeni forces, the port of Eilat, which is crucial to the Israeli economy, has been shut down completely. Normally, on an annual basis, just as an example, something around 150,000 cars are imported through the port of Eilat. Not a single car has come through. The port has gone bankrupt. It is not operating at all, thanks to the Yemeni forces closing the Bab el-Mandeb Straits. The northern part of the country, Israeli settlers can't go back. I mean, they might start, the whole premise of invading Lebanon and creating that horror that they did in southern Lebanon was to allow the Israelis to go back. Well, they're not going back. They may start going back, but it's complete chaos. It's paralyzed. The entire northern part of the country, the Israeli settlements are paralyzed, empty, ghost towns. So, of course, the state of Israel is crumbling. Israeli society is falling apart. At the same time, they still have a lot of weapons and a lot of money and staying power. So I think that even as we see these processes go on, we need to push as hard as we can for justice for Palestine. We need to keep pushing and talking about the genocide, making sure people realize that we're talking about that there is a genocide, making sure that people understand that it is an apartheid state. I'm reading now, I started reading the autobiography of Raphael Lemkin, who created the term genocide. It's really quite fascinating. But the term genocide, and this whole body of international law that describes crimes against humanity was established largely after the genocide of the Jews in Europe. And 3 years after that ended, the world allowed the genocide and the ethnic cleansing and an apartheid state to commence right there in Palestine. They allowed it to happen. And there was no question that there was a genocide. There was no question that there was ethnic cleansing. And there's no question that it's an apartheid state. So all of these things have to happen at the same time. And like I said, to see what is happening within Israeli society and to see the kind of they're shredding each other to bits is absolutely true. It's absolutely true. But we have to worry about the day after. So let's say it does fall apart tomorrow. They have a lot of weapons. There's a mentality there of violence that we saw, by the way, earlier in the movie that is not new. It's been going on for almost 8 decades, or actually longer than 8 decades. So we need to make sure that the lives, the security, the safety of Palestinians are somehow guaranteed. That's never been brought into conversation. There have to be guarantees put in place for the safety and security of Palestinians whose lives mean nothing. Palestinians can be killed in broad daylight anywhere in Palestine with no consequences. Their land can be taken, their homes can be destroyed. I mean, we know these, we know this already. But there have to be guarantees that say, okay, now these people's lives, these people's safety, these people's property have to be guaranteed. And again, that's when we need to step in. We need to make sure that our governments step in and impose these and provide these guarantees. Oh, here, want to take this?
You guys want to share it? No, just kidding.
Wait, just wait for the mic. Yeah. We've got a very complicated operation going here.
I have a question within a question, and I guess I don't know if it's even a question or a worry. You mentioned that
There you go.
you just said, on October 7th, when the Hamas fighters came and they kind of caught the IDF by surprise. Do you really think that was the case? Because where we read in media, it was, the Israeli government knew that they're practicing, and it was almost like they turned a blind eye because they wanted to carry out what they're doing now as an excuse. Do you think that's true? Do you think that they were really caught by surprise, or was it part of their plan? And so, as the new administration and Jared Kushner, the plan that they have for Gaza, and with all the worries that we have on how to fight the Palestinian cause. But just now I spent the afternoon in lobbying our government. But the moment you say the word genocide, they don't want to talk to you. The moment you say, you even question them, they turn the question back at you, saying, well, do you condemn Hamas? But that's not why I'm here. So how do we go? You have this wonderful office, which I'm thinking, my God, what can we do to help? But if Trump comes and they stop it, I feel like we're kind of in a dead end close. What do we do? That was my question.
Yeah. So, yeah.
I'll answer this first and then we'll go to the...
Yeah, sure. It's a very good question. I mean, so the first part of the question, I don't think Israel never needed excuses to attack Palestinians and kill Palestinians. They didn't need excuses to attack Gaza. They've been attacking Gaza for 7 decades, committing horrible massacres for 7 decades. This didn't start, October 7 or 2012 or whenever it is that Israel has been massacring and butchering people in the Gaza concentration camp from the moment they created the concentration camp. From the moment they created the concentration camp, Israeli forces have been committing massacres there. So they don't need an excuse. The excuse is the fact that the Palestinians are there. That's the reason they're killing them. I don't have any. Now, I'll say one more thing. Those of us that are old enough remember or can figure out that the attacks of October 7th came about exactly 50 years and 1 day after the 1973 October War began. Exactly 50 years and 1 day. I can't imagine that was a coincidence. I mean, I don't know for sure, of course, but I can't imagine it was. And what we saw over and over again, we saw it in 1973, we saw it in 2023, and we saw it in between many cases, that every single time the Israeli military was challenged by a well-disciplined, well-trained, highly motivated fighting force, they lost. Every single time. And there is this hubris on the Israeli side, and there's this attitude of they wouldn't dare. And if they did dare, what could they possibly do to us? And they maintain this hubris, they maintain this insane perspective, even as they're getting beaten over and over again. When this happens, they were caught unprepared. Now, among the shredding and the killing and the shouting that goes on within Israeli political circles, it seems like maybe there were some reports, but they didn't go up the chain of command. It doesn't really matter. The details are not important. The bottom line is they were caught unprepared. They were caught off guard. One of the most important military bases in the south, the Gaza Brigade base, was taken by Palestinian fighters. And it was empty, or practically empty. The very brigade that was supposed to prevent what happened, their base was taken. Does it really matter the details? I don't believe that, I absolutely don't believe that this was somehow, the Israelis watched from afar, let it happen so they can do this. I don't believe that, not for 1 minute, I think the Palestinians were brilliant. They did a good job. They're well disciplined. They're well trained, and they accomplished what they set out to accomplish, which is to take hostages and then negotiate for the freedom of Palestinian prisoners. We also know today that the vast majority, I don't know if all, but certainly the vast majority of Israelis who were killed by Israeli forces. So we know this a year later. I was unwilling to accept the Zionist narrative from the very beginning. I rejected it completely because they've always been lying. So why would they not lie now? And it made no sense anyway. The killing and the beheading and all the nonsense that they were spewing, it made no sense anyway. And there's no reason to believe it. Now the second part of your question, how do we? So they ask you, do you condemn? Do you condemn the Palestinians for what happened on October 7th? Condemn them for what? For what? For killing thousands of Israelis? Well, they didn't. That didn't happen. Most of the Israelis that were killed by Israeli forces. Condemn them for what? And I've been saying this over and over again. I remember, hearing stories about the partisans fighting fascism and all these different forces in Latin America fighting, against dictatorships. And even, in my lifetime, Spain was a fascist dictatorship, and Portugal, and all these other countries that you wouldn't dream of today. I don't ever remember having to condemn the people that fought tyranny. I never remember having to condemn anybody who fought these fascist, horrible regimes, except for Palestine. Palestinians, first of all, you have to condemn. Condemn them for what? I haven't heard an answer yet. I've been asking this, all the time. Condemn them for what? For being one of the most peaceful, accepting, tolerant nations on earth. For conducting a resistance, Because the Palestinian resistance has been in existence for a very long time. But the vast majority of the Palestinian resistance has been unarmed. So are we condemning them for that? Since 2005, many of us know, many of you I'm sure know, there have been protests every Friday in different villages and towns. They were killed. They were met with brutality. They paid an enormous price. Being killed, being tortured, having their homes demolished, now having their kids being arrested and tortured and killed and so on. Then we had the Gaza March of Return, and we saw what happened to them. How many more times do Palestinians need to protest without arms and be killed? And they need to be condemned? What, are we out of our minds? Condemn them for what? This is a luxury in the Gaza concentration camp. This, that a glass of water would just sit there, a bottle of water would just sit there, and nobody would rush to get it. People are dying, children are dying from dehydration in a concentration camp 5 minutes away from Israeli settlements where people sit like this. 5 minutes away. Children die from sepsis for having scratches on their feet because they're running around barefoot with, no home and so forth. And they're dying from that, children. 5 minutes away from some of the best medical facilities that one can imagine. And they're being killed and they're dying. They're not that they're dying, they're being killed. This is part of the genocide. Because they're not given access to go out of the concentration camp. That's why they're being killed. That's why they're dying. So they need to be condemned while the genocide is going on. People have looked up, sometimes I think, have completely lost their mind, and it's hard to blame people because the indoctrination is so severe. The Zionist pressure is so severe. But think about it for a second. Take a step back. Condemn them for what? There is nothing for which Palestinians need to be condemned. Nothing. Their heroism, their steadfastness, their resistance is something that will be told, not now, but in the future. They'll be held as some of the greatest heroes, in the history of mankind. So again, when these things come at us, I think it's important to go into these spaces where you're going to be attacked, you're going to be asked these questions, prepared. Practice with someone. They're going to come at you with these questions. Practice with if you're going in a group, practice. What are you going to say? How do you reclaim the conversation? How do you take control of the discourse? And that's all we got in these spaces.
Then they turn around and say, fake news. I mean, literally.
Yeah, they're going to say what they're going to say. They're going to say what they're going to say. There's nothing we can do about that. They're going to say what they're going to say. But I think we need to demonstrate our own, strength and our own convictions. And they're going to say what they're going to say.
And I'm going to be next, and then.
I agree with
There are
you.
also a few questions from on Zoom, if you want to
Sure.
at some point address some of those questions as well.
I will address them in a minute.
Yeah, in just a second. Yes. Well,
Sure, no problem.
I agree with you. The beginning of Zionism, but it's not a straightforward process, is it? On the one hand, there's the Zionist ideology that wants to exterminate and ethnic cleanse the Palestinians. On the other hand, Egypt is saying that we all thought that the Palestinians were going to be ethnic cleansed into the Sinai, but Egypt is resisting that, despite of EU and Western promises and of cash and all the rest of it. On the other hand, in northern Gaza, by occupying northern Gaza, the Israeli regime will be able to get access to so-called legitimate access to the oil and gas fields. So there's there's two processes that are fairly unstoppable, and it's going to be not as straightforward as it could be. What's your position on that?
And Miko, if you could briefly summarize the question, just so our Zoom audience can get all of it, because we don't hear the whole thing. Thanks.
Thank you, Krista.
So it's not straightforward. Of course, it's not straightforward. Israel will take the northern Gaza Strip. Israel wants the access to the oil fields. Israel wants the Palestinians in the Gaza concentration camp to go to a different concentration camp in northern Sinai. They want all kinds of things, and they will do everything they can to achieve these things. It's not straightforward, of course not. This is a war. We are fighting a war against a nasty, brutal enemy. The Zionists have always been violent. They've always been brutal. They've always been zealous. And that's part of the reason why they're so successful. They are determined to win. And they've been at it for over 100 years, well over 100 years, and they're used to winning by now. So they're not going to let up. They're not going to roll over and disappear or surrender. We are the ones that have to up our game. We don't want to see that happen. We don't want to see this. Then we need to stand and we need to be standing in the midst, and we need to make sure it doesn't happen. We elect our officials. We elect the members of the houses of representatives, the parliaments. We elect them. We elect our executives. We elect them. We vote for them. And granted, they're not listening to us, but I think the onus is on us. They're not going to come to us and welcome us into their spaces. We have to find ways. And in my office, I have a quote. I have a sentence that says we need to circumvent traditional politics using creative strategies. Regular politics doesn't work for us. It works for them. And it's been working for them, and they've managed to influence and manipulate it for a very long time. We're new to this game. We have to figure something out. Now, yes, they have the resources, they have the influence, but we have the truth. We're not lying. They're lying. Everything they say is a lie. And they cover it up with money. Now, the good thing is we don't need all that money because we're telling the truth. And we have international law on our side. And we're seeing international law begin to, shape up and operate as it should. Late, but still better late than never. We have a report by Francesca Albanese, the UN rapporteur, about the genocide. She's very clear. I don't know if you've seen, there's clips of her all over social media. She is fantastic, and she's getting beat up. Of course, she's called anti-Semitic and all that nonsense. But, they're not going to come to us. We have to do everything we can. Like I said, we have to double and triple our efforts if we want to see this end, because they know exactly where they're going. They may feel that there has been a hiccup here or there. There was a problem October 7th, but they quickly fixed it. And as long as they're killing more Palestinians than Palestinians are killing them, they're fine. And of course, the ratio is insane. But it's all on us, and it's never straightforward. And we also don't know when it's going to fall and which exactly point that we push is going to be the one. One day, or let me say it this way, if we sat here and it was 1988 or even 1989, and somebody said in 5 years Nelson Mandela is going to be president of a free South Africa, nobody would take him seriously. Nobody would. And one day it was okay to support apartheid. The next day, nobody could possibly say that they support apartheid anymore. It was that quick. One day Nelson Mandela was a president, was a terrorist. The next day, everybody adored him. He became a saint. Everybody loved him suddenly. That's how quickly it happens. But it takes a lot of pressure. We don't know how long it's going to take. We do know there's no question that it will happen, but we're going to have to work a lot harder and be much more organized and be much more clear. And again, you talked about the space we have in Washington. One of the objectives is to be a space where we can do that, where we can, crystallize, we can clarify. And there are lots of wonderful organizations that do fantastic work. We just need to find a place where we work together and we strategize together so we know where we're all going. And so that's what we need to do. Yeah.
Thank you. I just want to assure you we have 25 minutes left. We'll probably get to all your questions. We do want to take a question from our 200 and some people on Zoom. Krista, could you give us one of the questions and tell us where the person is from, like what country or... You with us, Krista? Krista?
Sorry, I'm listing the questions, so I don't know if I can figure that out that quickly, who asked what question, because there are several. So
All right, just give us a question.
They're just their names. It doesn't say where, unless I go into the other. In any case, there are several questions. I'll try to give you a few. So maybe
just one for now.
Okay, just one
maybe,
for now. Okay, what?
And we just go. Maybe you do a few, and then we go.
I just thought there's quite a few. I just thought you might be able to weave some of them together.
All right.
I just need to.
Miko says he can track more than one question.
I need a piece of paper. I can't. I'll write on this or something. Here's things.
Right on the thing.
Can I write on the tabletop? There we go.
He's like the traffic collision avoidance system on airplanes. You can track 25 airplanes at the same time.
All right, let's do it. Let's do this.
All right, go ahead.
So there's a question about media, like how can we get balanced coverage, and so what? Perhaps you could talk about the role of independent media in that regard, since we do have access to non-mainstream media at this point. That's one question about media. And there's also a question about the settlers' ability to to access land, to push through illegal land sales. There's been these conferences on selling the idea of settling Gaza, for example. And then related to that, one of the people mentions a specific settler, Daniela Weiss, and her intention to annex beyond historic Palestine. And then I think it would be important to just briefly talk about the what you think we can expect from the Trump administration. Where is he going to pick up where he left off last time? Does he have a completely new agenda based on the people he's put in place, like Mike Huckabee and Matt Gortz? And what recourse do we have to protect the Palestinians in the meantime while everybody is continuing with their agendas?
Okay, Krista, that's good. We have 3 questions. Thank you. And just an announcement before we get further, just as a small commercial. The map you see on the floor here is a map of Palestine in 1948. It has the names of every single village in Palestine in Arabic before Israel changed all these names. So if you're a Palestinian, it's a good idea to come and check your village and have your picture taken with it after the program is over. And on your way out, please grab a bunch of flyers and share them with your friends, especially if you go to demonstrations.
Okay, so media coverage, the mainstream or corporate media is, of course, another space that we're not being allowed in, and I think it's important for us to push into those spaces as well. And so that's another thing we need to figure out. But in the meantime, certainly the independent media has been doing fantastic work. Max Blumenthal very quickly and very brilliantly made a documentary about what happened on October 7th and so forth, using a great deal of Israeli sources. And so I recommend you watch that. And there are others. Abby Martin did a fantastic documentary about the Gaza March, the Great March of Return. And I mean, there's fantastic work is being done by wonderful journalists, courageous people. And of course, journalists in Gaza, Palestinian journalists that are putting out all this information. So what's happening is, I think the mainstream media has become completely irrelevant, because nobody goes to the New York Times to get real news, or to the Guardian, or if we want real news, we go to the real sources. We go to independent media. And again, I think there's going to be a whole moment. At one point, there's going to be a moment of reckoning where the editorial boards of the mainstream media and the administrations of all the big universities, not to mention the politicians, are all going to look for a place to hide, because they're going to be so embarrassed by the fact that they stood and supported genocide. They allowed the genocide, they supported the genocide, and they went on and attacked people who spoke up against the genocide. And again, of course, I'm talking about students on campuses and so on. In this strange in the strange upside down world that we exist in, Palestinians are the ones they need to be condemned for standing up. Students are being penalized on campuses for demanding justice. The students, these brave students on campuses that stood up, at least in the United States, many of them are suspended. Many of them are not allowed to graduate. The ones who graduated didn't get their diplomas. They're facing all kinds of legal actions and so on, procedures they have to go through. They're being punished. They're being disciplined. And these university administrators, I think, are going to, again, at one point, they're going to have to hide themselves somewhere, and their kids are going to be embarrassed that they share the same names because of this. So there's a long line of people like that who I think we're going to remember, and we'll have to go down on their knees and apologize one day. The settlers, the settlers purchasing or buying or stealing land. Well, of course, that's what this is all about. Of course, they're going to do that, and they're going to do more and more and more of it. And of course, that's what it's about. It's about getting rid of the Palestinians and taking their land to build settlements for Jews only. So we shouldn't be surprised when we see these conferences where they do these things. That's what this is all about. It's about giving this land to other people. And these are the people that want the land. So if we want that to stop, again, it's up to us to get in there and bring about the change and force the change. If we want to see Palestinians be released from these horror prisons in which they exist right now, again, that's not going to happen on its own. Again, the liberation of the Gaza Strip, we haven't even talked about Jerusalem. The erasure of Arab and Muslim history in Jerusalem is moving at such a rapid pace that it is beyond belief. And somebody mentioned Mike Huckabee, the new U.S. ambassador, or somebody from the new administration, is talking about clearly there needs to be a building of a Jewish temple instead of Al-Aqsa compound. These people have lost their minds. To us, it seems like they've lost their minds. For them, this is the plan in progress. This is the plan in progress. I've gone on these so-called tours that the settlers do on Al-Aqsa compound several times. They don't see the beauty. They don't see the Dome of the Rock. They don't see Al-Aqsa. They see it as something that needs to be removed so that they can build their own thing. And as you walk up to take the tour, there's a bridge that goes from Al-Buraq, from the Western Wall to the Al-Aqsa compound. And midway on that bridge, there's a huge model of the temple. It's huge. It's a huge, almost not life-size, but enormous model of the temple already there. And that's where everybody stops and takes a look and, pretend like this is what we're all praying for. It's going to happen. I mean, they're destroying Islamic culture and history and monuments all the time. The Ibrahimi Mosque is all in Hebron is all but taken by settlers. The settlers come and go whenever they please, even though it's supposedly divided between the settlers and Palestinians. The Palestinians can never go into the side of the settlers. The settlers go into the Palestinian mosque all the time and desecrate it. And these monuments are precious. Historically, culturally, architecturally, these are priceless, and they're going to go. They're going to be destroyed. There's no question they're going to be destroyed because the de-Arabization and de-Islamization of Palestine is key, an absolute key, and they'll destroy the Christian monuments as well. There's no question about that. So yes, this is all part of the plan. This is all going to happen. And the only way it's going to stop is if we stop it. It's not going to come from a president or a prime minister or anybody at the top. It's going to come from us. This is it. If we want to see change, look around you. This is it. And, the good news is that there are lots of rooms like this with lots of people that I speak to and many others, around the country and around the world. But this is it. It's not going to come from anybody else. And then the last question, what to expect for Trump? Well, the worst. Expect the worst. There's no question. There's no other way to answer that.
All right, so we had a person there. You
I did forgot about it. Sorry, don't worry. Hello, hi. My question is, how else can we make the Zionists even more of a pariah? Because in the UK, there have been some successes in terms of Barclays Bank. I think they've completely divested from the Zionist entity. And we're looking, no, they haven't. Okay, I tell a lie. All right. Okay. Oh, okay, from Helpix. Do you think, I mean, are there any success stories in the States? I mean, football here, or as you wrongly say in the States, soccer, there's an initiative there to sort of, try and take...
Well, to kick Israel out of FIFA.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, what's happened over there? Is there any sort of suggestions or anything that would help
It's a good
in that
question.
regard?
Yeah.
And again, Miko, if you could just repeat the question so we can hear on Zoom. Thank you.
Sure. So the question is, are there any stories of success of penalizing and sanctioning Israeli teams, different spaces in which the Zionists come and like sports and so on. So yeah, there are all these efforts. These are great efforts, and there are small cases where actually there has been there've been divestment here and there, and there are efforts to kick Israel. There's been an effort going on for a very long time to kick Israel out of FIFA, and that brings up a whole other issue. So we would think that we have allies, that the allies are obvious. Well, it's not obvious when it comes to this at all. I'll tell you a little episode. This is something that happened I think it was last year, that Indonesia hosted the men 20 and under football championships, the FIFA championships. And they allowed the Israeli team to participate. They qualified, and they allowed them to participate. And what I heard from Indonesian activists in Indonesia who approached me was that the Palestinian Authority representative there said, sure, let them come, why not? We don't need to boycott them at all. And the Indonesian government was perfectly happy to let them participate. So what happens is, well, I'll tell you the end of the story. So you're not, so what happened was, this is how absurd it is. The anti-normalization activists in Indonesia asked me to put out a video. I put out a video that went viral in Indonesia. I put 2 or 3 videos actually explaining why a team of young Israeli men, 20 and under, or under 21, whatever it's defined, should not be permitted to come and play and participate in FIFA, as thousands of Palestinian athletes' legs are being amputated because they were shot by snipers, many of whom could be these football players. This had to be said. So then eventually, certain governors within Indonesia said they would not allow the Israeli teams to play in their states. Indonesia was penalized, and the games were completely taken out of Indonesia for security reasons. So that, there's obviously a big problem here. Number one, why now the Indonesians are being penalized for something they didn't do anything wrong. Why are they being penalized? And so the normalization, and this goes to the issue of normalization. The Muslim countries and Arab countries that are normalizing, there's a great deal of pressure on them to normalize. And when they don't, they get penalized. So now Indonesians lost opportunities for business, opportunities to see great football, and for what? For doing what? What would they do next time? Are they more likely to want to normalize, or are they more likely to reject normalization now? And there's nobody really doing the work to counter the pressure to normalize. There's nobody there doing that work. And the pressure to normalize is great. So that's part of why it's so hard, for example, to kick Israel out of FIFA. Because we don't have the natural allies that we assume we have when it comes to the votes of kicking Israel out. Same thing with the Olympics. The same thing with academic spaces and all the any other areas, any other arenas that you can imagine. We don't have enough. We don't have the allies there doing the work. And all these other countries, Algeria, Pakistan, all these different countries that we assume will never normalize, it's a wrong assumption. The pressure to normalize is huge, and there is no counter. There's nobody there to support the anti-normalization. So that's another thing we want to take on at one point as Palestine has the freedom to start working with some of the diplomatic missions in Washington, D.C., to start working on with these countries to see how we can support these anti-normalization forces, because we can't win without them. And again, that goes back to why it's so difficult to penalize the state of Israel in all these different arenas.
I think we had one person there, and you're next after that. These together and talk a lot.
Thank you. Hi, Miko. Thank you. You mentioned it yourself, and some of our friends have mentioned it before. Israel Zionists have a very clear ideology. If anything, they're very consistent in what they want to do. What I don't understand, I grew up from an island called Mauritius. My grandfather said it to me, my father said it to me, and I'm finding myself saying it now. What about the Arab League? Why are they so toothless? This is what I don't understand. This is what I'm trying to understand. America is very clear in its support to Israel. You mentioned earlier what a group from Yemen managed to do if they stood up. Now, I'm not advocating all-out war. To me, it seems that only Iran is willing to stand up to Israel. There are more than 50 Muslim majority countries. Why can't they stand up and fight? I'm not advocating war, but surely there must be a red line. Israel seems to be pushing the boundaries all the time. So I just want to understand your viewpoint. When are they going to stand up and say enough is enough?
Thank you.
So that's another one of these questions that is asked very often. And the answer, I think the answer is not the obvious one. So if you're the leader of an Arab state and you look around you, what do you see? What do you see? You see the countries that stood up against Israel, that stood up for Palestine. And you see Iraq, and you see Libya, and you see Syria, and you see Yemen. And then you expand it, you go all the way to Iran, and you see the sanctions and the way Iranians are suffering. Now you're a leader of a country, and your responsibility is to your country and to your people. Yes, you want to see a free Palestine. Yes, you feel terrible about what is happening to Palestinians. But do you surrender that to maintain the integrity of your own country? Or do you put your country and your people at risk, knowing full well they may end up, in best case scenario, they'll be put on a terrorist supporting list of countries and will suffer horribly from sanctions? At best. At worst, you'll end up in rubble. You'll end up like Iraq. So it's easy to say, where are they? How come? Why are they not? But we need to remember that Israel is already 100 years ahead of us. They're in Africa. Israel has, I think, over 40 diplomatic missions in Africa. And you have to ask yourself, why? A country that participated in the pillaging of Africa, a country that participating in supporting some of the worst dictators in Africa, a country that was allied with apartheid South Africa, strong ally, who supported Mobutu after Patrice Lumumba was assassinated. Why would any African country welcome and want to work with it? Well, because they're smart and they know how to get in there and to influence. And again, so number one, they're ahead of us and they're already taking care of that. They're already there. And people may hate them, but the point is, if they're concerned about the welfare and the benefits of their own countries, and Normalizing with Israel is a bridge to America, which means investments, which means better, better economic opportunities for you as a country and for your people. So what would you do? It's very easy to judge, but what would you do? And I don't think it's an easy question. I don't think that's an easy solution. So I don't think we need to be any more hard. I think if we want to be harsh on someone, it needs to be the Britain. It needs to be the United States. It needs to be the European rich countries. They're the ones who can afford it. They're the ones who can impose sanctions tomorrow. They're the ones who could have, never mind prevented it, but can end it now. This entire horror could have been prevented if the Europeans, if the West stood up and cared one iota about the lives of Palestinians. So again, it's easy to look at the Arab countries and the Muslim countries and say, well, why aren't they doing anything? Why isn't the West doing anything? The West can afford it. That, I believe, should be is the more crucial question.
Finally.
Do you want to take one more question from Zoom?
Next.
I had this fantasy of you. Oh, hello. I had this fantasy of you having a long meeting with Trump in the new year and trying to make him see the light. Well, because otherwise everything else is
strange
really
fantasy.
So fry, Why don't you go to the top? Because I don't think he's very bright. You just have to charm him. Because, once he said of Putin, once the head of the most powerful country in the world, he said, I like Putin because he was very nice to me. He said nice things about me. This is his caliber, So there you are. There's a thought for you on the plane back to America.
Thank you.
I'm not sure there's an answer for that. Listen, I'm not sure there's an answer for that.
Put it in a comment.
Yeah.
We can reclassify it as a comment. How's that?
Yeah, so there you go.
But thank you. It was very thoughtful. Krista, we'll take one final question from the Zoom audience. I know we're down to 198 people on the.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of questions, but perhaps you can address.
One question.
I know, address Christian nationalism.
Okay.
And the impact that has on the situation on the ground.
Well, what about it?
I mean, they would like you to comment on the impact of Christian nationalism. Obviously, that's woven into the Trump administration as well, so that's a related question. But and AIPAC, for that matter, those are two questions that perhaps are somewhat related in terms of the impact on American policy.
Thanks, Krista.
Well, I don't know. I mean, is there anything we don't know about the Christian Zionists and AIPAC that could be said? I mean, they are obviously, they have a great deal of influence. They are very good at what they do. I don't know if you know about Mike Huckabee and, the new ambassador. He was governor of Arkansas. And I remember years and years ago, I was in Palestine at a protest in Jerusalem, in Sheikh Jarrah, when the Sheikh Jarrah protest began. It was years ago. And somebody held a sign that said, Mike Huckabee, go home. I thought, Mike Huckabee? He's the governor of Arkansas. What do you mean go home? Well, apparently he's been visiting and supporting these West Bank settlers. And he was supporting this group that was taking over parts of Sheikh Jarrah and other neighborhoods in East Jerusalem. And he was there. He was there across the fence in this one particular building that was being taken by settlers. And now it's funny, I thought when he was nominated as the ambassador, he could be Israel's ambassador to the United States, the way he talks and the way he thinks, not the other way around. But I mean, the entire administration are people like that. They're all, it seems like they're all of that, of that ilk. They're all these lunatic Zionist Christians. But again, I think that I mean, there's no way to anticipate, and it's certainly not going to go. It's not straightforward. But I really believe, and I may be naive, but I really believe that once it changes, it's going to change across the board. Even these people will one day look back. It's like after World War II, there were no Nazis in Germany. After apartheid failed, there were no racists in South Africa. There were no white supremacists in South Africa. You know, everybody loved Mandela. So I mean, when it changes across the board. And I'm pretty sure that these people will change as well once we rise to the occasion and force our way in. And again, it's going to be on us to bring about the change. They're not going to change on their own. But once we figure that out, and once we get to that point, the change, I believe, will be across the board. And even those people today, they're not going to say Nelson Mandela was a terrorist, even though I'm sure they're white supremacists and are quite happy to see black people living under a different kind of set of rules, and so forth. And so I think that we shouldn't be distracted by that, or you know what I mean. We need to do everything we can to completely change the conversation. We should do everything we possibly can to stand in the midst and protect Palestinian lives, and to find a way to impose sanctions and an arms embargo and so on, so that we can guarantee the safety and security of Palestinians once and forever. And that should be the focus. All these other things are important, but they're distractions. Yes, they all stand in the way, but they all stand in the way. And we need to take them into consideration as we move forward. And we need to take into consideration that they're going to come after us. They're going to call us anti-Semites and terrorist supporters and all the different things that they can do, because that's all they have. We know what they have in their arsenal. This country saw how they were this close to having Jeremy Corbyn as prime minister, and what happened, what they did to him. Everybody here saw that, right? I mean, you've felt it. You sensed it. You felt it. You experienced it. So we know what they're capable of. And I dug up something that I wrote in 2016 or 2017, where I said there's no way the Zionists were going to let him ever become prime minister. And they didn't. They pulled out everything they had. So we know what they have in their arsenal. We just need to gear up for a fight. We need to be prepared. We need to be willing to get into that fight, not show up with roses, but show up ready to fight and ready to free Palestine, so that this beautiful thing can go back to being this. So I believe finally, I believe very strongly that it's possible. I just believe that, I want to invite everybody to double their efforts, triple their efforts, so that we can see a free Palestine already. Thank you.
Thank you, Miko. Hang on here for a couple of minutes. I'd like to thank you, our audience here at the P21 Gallery at the exhibit Art of Palestine from the River to the Sea. I'd like to thank the more than 250 people who joined us from around the world to listen to Miko talk about Free Palestine. And I'd like to thank my co-host, Krista Brun, who is in Madison, Wisconsin. She and I team up on these programs every weekend. We show a film on Saturday. We have what we call a Madafa program. This is a special Madafa midweek Madafa session that we're at here today. Madafa means guest house in Arabic. And we like to, if you have time, if you haven't seen the exhibit, take a look. There are 2 floors here, lower floor and this floor here. And if you're a Palestinian, check the map. Make sure you see your village there, take pictures and send them home. Because every map you see now doesn't have these names anymore, because Israel, after emptying these villages of people and destroying and bulldozing them, they also changed their names. So you can't find them on the modern maps. And we have people come to the exhibits, like, I always put a map of Palestine on the floor in my exhibits. And people come and say, the map is wrong. It says Israel. I said, it says 1948 on it. Anyway, thank you so much. Yes. Yeah. Well, that's Salman's map. If you read the title up there, it's his organization. Yeah, we sell them at the museum in the US, but we don't ship them to here because they're so heavy. Each one is like 3 kilos. Yes.
Sold out, essentially, there are lots of organizations like Sand Cinema and whatever who are allowing online presence.
Yeah, let me repeat that so people on Zoom can also hear it. The Palestine Film Festival is in progress in London. So check it out.
Oh,
Anybody else want to have an announcement about the wedding of their friends?
all right. Thank you, everybody.
Guys,
Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Miko.
Thank you.
Always appreciate your wisdom.
Go ahead, Krista. You can.
Freedom or information, there's a QR code on the back.
Excuse me? The map is big enough you can read the things while you're standing.
Faisal, are you able to turn the camera so that people in Zoom land can see the map? There we go. Yeah, it's a huge map of historic Palestine that includes all of. Faisal himself is from the destroyed village of Salama, which is near Jaffa.
Let's say that again.
I was just letting our audience know that you're from the village of Salama, which is one of the destroyed villages from 1948.
You understand what you said? No? I'm having trouble hearing you because there are all kinds of noise here and echoes.
Okay, no problem.
Okay.
You know, I went to my no, not today.
Yes. Sorry? You want to say something to me?
And of course, for Palestinians who were displaced in 1948 or 1967, I will continue to tell them that's where they're from. Their descendants will tell you the same, and they know the date when that village was erased. And I apologize about the background noise with the attendees there at the P21 Gallery in London. We do appreciate all of you tuning in today for this special program where we got to see the orphan and hear from Miko Peled. Be sure to check out Dar al-Hurriya, the House of Freedom. I put that link in the chat so that you can look up the work that he's doing, the important work to draw attention to the policies that Palestinians are facing with occupation, apartheid, and genocide, and how you can get involved in raising awareness about the history of Palestine and what Palestinians are calling for. So thank you so much for joining us today. Be sure to sign up on our on the Palestine Museum mailing list, and that way you will be informed of future programming at the Palestine Museum US. We do host regular films on Saturdays, as well as what we call Madafa conversations on Sundays, where we invite writers, artists, and journalists and others from the community in order to engage in conversation on the topic of Palestine. So thank you so much for joining us today. I can share that email sign up one more time there in the chat. And do appreciate all of you tuning in today. It was quite a crowd from all over the world. We really take pride in the reach that we have thanks to technology like Zoom. So thanks for tuning in today, and we hope to see you in future programming. You're welcome to stay on and just continue to watch our attendees there at the P21 Gallery in London. We're so grateful to these venues for hosting our exhibitions. Palazzo Mora in Venice, the tiny, lovely gallery in Ireland, in Bantry, Ireland, that is hosting the exhibition Art Under Fire, Palestinian Defiance in Black, White, and Color, running through December 13th. It's, in this day and age where there are public officials and others who say there's no such thing as Palestinians, there's no such thing as Palestine. It's more important than ever to hold space for Palestinian conversation, to showcase the Palestinian story through the arts and through any means at our disposal. Of course, we have all kinds of people speaking, writing, making art, making music, theater, dance. There's lots of ways to express the Palestinian story. And we try to showcase those stories through the arts here at the Palestine Museum US.
A higher level priority than that. If we can make that change, I want to change other things.